Hello, hello. Welcome to Courage Becomes Her, where we connect and share real life stories. I'll talk with women whom I love and am inspired by, women who are experiencing life just like you and me. I'm excited for us to gather together and cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in life and work.
And I look at my sons who are young adults, they're in their 20s and 30s. You really think you have all the control in the world to make your life what you want it to be. There's this illusion of control. You think that if I just make the right choices or do certain things, everything's going to go according to plan. I think as you mature and get older and older, you realize how little control you actually have. And so our process of making peace with a life that doesn't look quite like we thought it would, and that's what a midlife crisis is all about, by the way. It's actually a process, a journey of grieving the fact that you don't have as much control as you think. So when you see men or women having a midlife crisis, they're scrambling, trying to get control.
That was Michele Cushatt. Oh, I am so excited to have Michele join us again today. So Michele was with us at the end of July, where we talked about her newest book, A Faith That Will Not Fail. And I'm excited to reintroduce you to her and to have her join us for this conversation today. So just a little bit about Michele for those of you who may not know who she is. She is a wife and a mom to 6. She is a 3-time cancer survivor, and she's also an executive coach, a presentation coach, an author, and a speaker. You'll hear through our conversation today, as well as from the conversation in July, that she is very much an expert on trauma and pain and the deep human need for authentic connection and enduring faith. And I have just been so honored and so delighted to be able to learn from Michele over the years and to just be grown, to grow up, to mature through her teaching. And I love also that she's someone who loves to hike the Colorado Rockies. You'll hear a little bit about that in our conversation today. So having her on today is just such a delight, and I'm so excited because we are doing a double header conversation where we are going to finish out the friendship series that we've been on over the last handful of weeks. And then we're going to kick off our new series about surviving midlife. So for friendship, Michele and I are diving into the topic of what does it look like when you are unable to reciprocate in your friendships, when your tank is empty and you're just in a hard season and just are not able to give in the way that you want to with your friends. Both Michele and I have experienced that personally, and so we just talk from a place of experience for both of our lives. Then for midlife, surviving midlife, we dive into this topic about how in the world do we make peace with life, with midlife, when it's not at all what we had expected or envisioned. We talk about what does it look like when we have to let go of dreams that have died or that we know are just never going to happen and never going to come true, and how we face all of that with hope rather than with pessimism or fatalism. So I am beyond grateful and excited to be able to have Michele back with us today and to talk about these two very important and helpful topics. Michele, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation of Courage Becomes Her. I am so happy to have you back with me.
Me too.
So
I've been
fun.
we so connected last time. So to me, it was an easy yes to come back on and for us to talk about real life stuff that we're walking through too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to have been able to share you and your book, A Faith That Will Not Fail, with the community, and just as excited to be able to share some shared experiences as well. So we got to know you just a tad bit in that July 28th conversation, but let's maybe do some of it a little bit again and update, some of those. So tell us a little bit about home and a little bit about home life, and in our last conversation, you said that you've had teenagers in your home for 18 years, which
Oh,
is just nuts.
yes. And remember, 2 of those years was COVID, where the kids were home full time. They were 13, 13, and 13 when COVID hit. And so let's just take a moment to let that sink in. Three 13-year-olds doing school from home. And so I'm like, it's 18 years chronologically that I've had teenagers, but when you add the COVID dynamic on top of it, it feels like it should be 36 years.
Totally. Totally. Oh
So
my
yes,
gosh.
I have 6 children, ages from 31 all the way down to twin 16-year-olds. So right now, 3 of my kids are grown and out of the house. 3 of my kids are still at home, and they're 16, 16, and 17. School started at the time of this recording. School started just a couple of days ago. So we are like full on in that transition period from the footloose and fancy free summer months to right back into the school schedule.
Yeah.
And let's just say there's all kinds of resistance about that reality. So that's just kind of my day-to-day life. I'm married to my husband, Troy, and we live in between Colorado Springs and Denver, Colorado, on 8 acres out in the country. And so we have wildlife and we have all kinds of interesting weather where we are because we're just a little higher elevation than Denver. And which means we have great, great snow in the winter and we have beautiful sunshine in the summer. And we love where we live. We love the quiet and the countryside and the wildlife and all of it.
So good. So good. Okay, we didn't get to talk about this last time, but a normal question that all of our, regular episode guests answer is a little bit about you from Enneagram and love language. So tell us about your Enneagram and your love language.
Okay, so I'm going to start with love language because that will be probably shorter than my Enneagram conversation. Love language, I tend to be words of affirmation. So professionally, I'm an executive coach and a presentation coach and an author and speaker. So my world is all about communication and developing people. That's really in every area, whether it's writing books or traveling and speaking or doing coaching, it's communication and development with other people. It's all about relationship and using words to be able to create those kind of transformative environments, regardless of what they look like. And so, so words of affirmation, it's not really a big surprise that someone who makes their living with communication and relationship would also value words of affirmation. And so that's my love language. It's also, if you really want to hurt me, that's the way to get me is with words. So that's that Enneagram. I am an Enneagram 2 with a really strong 1 wing. In fact, I have a very strong committee of 1 voices in my head, right? That committee constantly telling me it needs to be perfect and you need to do it right all the time and all of that. So, but I am an Enneagram 2, which is the helper. For those who are listening, I took the Enneagram test probably no less than 6 times, a wide variety of tests, even paid tests, assessments, because I didn't want to be a 2.
Yeah.
And darn it, I am a 2. Quite honestly, I've embraced it more the longer that I've kind of worked through my Enneagram knowledge and read books about it and all of that. And I love being a helper. And it's not surprising when you look at my website and everything else, the language communicates very clearly that is who I am. My challenge has been learning to operate from a place of health as a helper. And so not having my sense of value or worth or identity tied to the reciprocation of other people's communication of my value. And so you can see how my love language of words of affirmation and Enneagram can play naughty together or they can play nice together. And so my ongoing growth is to learn how to really be in such a place of health that I can give to those around me and develop clients or friends or my kids or whatever to pour into them without having my sense of value tied to their response.
Yeah, that's good. So good. And something we can definitely all learn from for sure. Oh gosh. Okay, in July, you told us that your current obsession was the Bema podcast, which
Yes.
is so incredible. Thank you for
Oh, so
letting
you
us
went and
know
listened to
about
it?
that. Yes, yeah, I haven't
Good.
listened to too many episodes, but at least got started. So,
Good.
what is a current obsession of yours?
Yeah.
If
So
it's not
another
still the Bema.
obsession. Yeah. I mean, I still love the Bama podcast. I learned so much. The kind of the deep dive into the Old Testament, especially the creation narrative and all that kind of stuff, was so valuable to me. But another obsession I have right now is the Lectio 365 app.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So have you heard of that?
Yes, yeah, I've had clients who have used it, and it was introduced to me by another coach at one point. So,
There you
yeah.
go. My Lectio 365 app has been a really, really sweet addition to my routine. And what I like is it's easily accessible. It's right on my phone. I can hit start. It forces me to stop and close my eyes and just kind of listen and soak up. So much of what I do every day is reading and input, and I'm, studying and doing all of that. It's a beautiful thing for me to not have to read something, but to be able to play it in my earbuds or
Mm,
whatever and close my eyes and just soak it up.
that's
It
good.
just puts me in a posture of receiving. And that's why it's been such a sweet addition to my routine lately.
Mm,
And really a soul heart filling activity.
mm,
So
I love that. So good. So good. So, speaking of that, what has made you laugh or filled your cup in the last few days or so?
the last few days or so, I would say I've been doing a lot of, well, I'm an outdoor person, I'll tell you that. If you kind of picked up on that at the beginning when I shared about living out in the country and the wildlife, I love to be outside. And so, two things that fill my cup are good, meaningful conversations with close friends. Like,
Mm.
get right past the superficial small talk and dive into the deep end of the pool. But when you combine that with being outside, like going for a hike or a walk, that is like gold.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
last week I went for a hike with one of my friends, and I took her up to the Continental Divide, and we did a hike that was way, way high altitude. She's not used to altitude. And just walking with her, talking, but also cheering her on to do something
Oh,
really hard, to kind of
I love that.
push against
Yeah.
her limits and experience the reward at the top of the mountain.
Mm.
That filled my cup.
Beautiful. So good. So good. Okay, what's a best movie or show that you've seen in the last year-ish?
Best movie or show? Well, I love to laugh. I love to laugh. And one of the shows that I have found to be quite hilarious is the show Ghosts.
Oh,
Have you ever heard
okay.
of that?
I haven't heard of it or seen it.
Okay. So it sounds so crazy. I mean, a show about ghosts, but it's a comedy and it's just funny and the characters are funny and they're so unique. And it's just a light-hearted, somewhat brainless show. And I've really
Okay.
enjoyed watching it
Yeah.
because it's nice to find a show that's funny without being crass all the time. Like it's just
Hmm.
funny.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
that one's been really delightful for me. I've enjoyed it.
We need that. We need that for sure. Okay, what was the first concert that you ever went to?
I was trying to think of what it was. First of all, I grew up in a very conservative Christian household.
Yeah.
And I would even say my parents, as they got older, loosened up a little bit. But in my childhood, very, very conservative. So concerts weren't something we were very often allowed to go to unless they were Christian
Yeah.
concerts. So I would say, I think my first concert was probably an Amy Grant's Michael W. Smith concert way back in
Okay.
the early 80s,
Yeah. Yeah.
mid 80s. So long time ago. I still remember I think it was like a state fair or some kind of outdoor venue because I remember being outside and seeing Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith do their thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hey, they're still doing their thing.
They still
So
are. They're still doing their thing together. So good. I've talked about it on a previous podcast episode as well, but Amy Grant was my first concert.
oh, really?
Yeah, and also at the state fair. So that's hilarious.
That's so funny.
Not
Not
Michael W. Smith though,
surprising.
but Amy by herself. So good. So good.
Okay, last one. A book that has transformed your life. So you told us in our last conversation, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering by
Hmm.
Tim Keller. So tell us another one that is a book that's transformed your
Um,
life.
I have a behind me, there's a bookshelf, and I've got a section that has the books that have been just the most impactful to me sitting there. And
Mm,
there's several. So I probably have a list of about 10 to 15. And most of the books that I've written will have a list of books that I recommend in the back.
yeah.
And many of these are listed there. If anybody is interested, check out one of my books and you will see a book list in the back. But I would say, I'm struggling between some books by Henry Nouwen, or
Mm,
how other people say it, Henri,
hmm hmm
and
hmm
Brennan Manning. So
Yeah. Mm,
I would say for today, I'm going to say Abba's Child by Brennan Manning was really
mm,
transformative for me, and kind of ties in with our conversation about love languages and
yeah.
Enneagram. I've been chasing my value or my worth for my whole life.
Yeah.
Like it's been something that's been just a chink in my armor of just this constant feel of unworthiness. And I've been
Mm,
chasing after that. And I do that by achievement, like so many people do. I'm a high achiever. And Abba's Child, I read years and years ago. It's been a number of years now, but it was such a balm to my soul to realize that God is my father. He's my Abba.
yeah.
But that he looks at me and he just smiles and says, "You belong to me.
Yeah. Mm,
You are mine," and that he actually chooses me. He doesn't come to me begrudgingly, like, "Oh, fine, I'll accept you since I have to. Since
mm,
Jesus
mm,
died, I have to accept." He actually delights in me, and that was a really big shift for me, and a key part of me getting grounded in who I am and being able to operate from a place of abundance rather than chasing after value.
yeah. So good. That is an absolutely beautiful book. So I could totally see how it has transformed your life. And I think it goes back to our conversation from July so much as
Yeah.
well of like being able to, when you're in the muck, in the mire, in the wrestling of, like you said a second ago, who you are and, where your identity is found. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much in that. So I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for letting us get to know you some more today. And again, for joining us. So, you agreed to my like kind of crazy idea of doing a little bit of a double header conversation of finishing out our friendship series and
Mm-hmm.
talking about a topic within that we haven't covered in the previous episodes with the other guests, and then to launch into our newest series of surviving midlife, if you will. So let's talk first about friendship. So I think you are uniquely qualified to talk about this aspect of friendship that I want us to talk about, of what it's like when you can't reciprocate in friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give just a tad bit of context for what I mean by that based on my own life. So the Courage Becomes Her listeners know my husband came on and shared with me back in the beginning of June of just real very, very difficult time that we've been going through the last 2 years, like the worst time of our marriage together, worst time of our lives together. And in that, as a result of that, like my tank has been empty for two
Mm-hmm.
years. And so the ability to lean into friendships and to give to friends is just totally not there. It
Mm-hmm.
just hasn't been there. And that has pressed on me because I've had friends who are also going through really difficult things or big life transitions. And I've not had the capacity to be able to support them, be there for them in the way that I would like. And so I think, again, like I said, you are uniquely qualified to speak to this because of life experiences and situations that you've been through 3 times of cancer, of your dad's cancer, of your, foster adopt kids and all that they've been through in their lives, and then some
Yeah.
of all of
Yeah.
your life experiences. So just let's talk about that a little bit of like, what do you do when you can't reciprocate in friendship?
Yeah. Boy, I feel that in my bones. And as we just got done talking about love languages and Enneagram, I find my value, or I feel somewhat of an oxytocin hit, like a rush when I can help other people. So when I
Yeah.
can't do that, it cuts me deep, because then all of a sudden, like if I can't keep up and match and reciprocate in relationship, the old narrative in my head says, well, then what are you worth, right? You're not worth anything if
Hmm.
you can't do that. And there's this kind of sense of needing to keep score in relationship, that if somebody gives you something, you need to give back. Like it needs to be one for one and reciprocal and all that kind of stuff. And yet the truth is for at least the last, let's see, 13 years, I've been dealing with serious health crisis, life and death health, multiple times over, loss of critical family members, parenting, again, like we talked about, parenting 6 teenagers, and then foster adopting 3 more kids with a history of severe trauma. And that has left me in a place where my resources are tapped out. So I can't keep up. Like if a friend is bringing me a meal or doing something nice for me, I don't always have the time or even the brain space to reciprocate. And so
Mm.
that brings up all kinds of challenges, right? Where we
Yeah.
not only do we question our own value, but then, for me, there's this fear of, if I don't do enough for this relationship, will they leave me? Yeah, will they stop being
Hmm.
friends? Have you ever felt that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely where I've been the last couple of years of like thinking, are these friendships going to survive because I'm, so absent from them?
Yeah. 100%. And at different stages, there were a couple of years in there where I was so sick that I couldn't even respond to text messages. Like
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
so sick that even replying back to somebody's message and saying, thank you for sending me a note, it's good to hear from you, I couldn't even do that. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't even well enough to keep my eyes focused to look at a text screen and reply.
Hmm.
And so we're talking, like I had no ability to reciprocate. All I could do was receive. And that
Yeah.
wasn't just for a couple hard days, that was for a couple of years. And so that
Yeah.
creates all kinds of challenges, from kind of my internal narrative, my internal challenges, and wrestling with what that means about who I am, but then also the practical implications of how does it impact your relationships and what do I do about
Hmm.
that? And so maybe we want to just kind of talk about both of those areas, and how I've walked through that. Practically speaking, and a couple of my closest friends have reminded me of this, relationships are reciprocal, but they're not always even and reciprocal at the same
Hmm.
time,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so a couple of my closest friends have reminded me, when I've really struggled with not being able to give back, they're like, how about we just take turns? And right now it's your turn.
Hmm.
And it can be your turn as long as you need your turn. And then we know that when the time comes that we need you, that at some point in time, you'll have more capacity to be able to give back. But right now,
Yeah.
it's your turn and it's okay to receive. And so I think what was helpful about that practically is we had an honest conversation about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's probably the most important thing about walking through these seasons where we're not be able to be as engaged with our friendship, is find,
Yeah.
15 minutes or so to actually just have an honest conversation, and to be able to say, and I've said this to many of my friends, I realize right now that I'm not able to give you back as much as my heart wants to. My heart wants
Yeah.
to do all of this. And the reality of my life is I just can't. And I so appreciate
Mm.
your grace and your patience with that. But I just want you to know, I recognize that right now you are giving so much more to this friendship than I am. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that's not easy. And I just want to tell you, thank you. I appreciate it. So
Mm.
it's like taking this thing that's unspoken and laying it on the table between you and just
Yeah.
having an honest conversation about it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. and it makes so much sense. But there is, that's a hard thing to do,
It is.
to even approach that conversation. Would you say too that, like, I mean, one of the things I've been struggling with is just like knowing, do I apologize? How do I apologize? Like just there's that
Yeah.
acknowledgement, but also like I want them to know that I am sorry that I'm not
Yeah.
in that place.
We tend to think of apologies as purely admittance of wrongdoing. And so those of
Hmm.
us that tend to be a bit on the perfectionist scale are resistant to that if we don't feel like we've done anything wrong. Like, it's not my fault I'm going
Hmm.
through this hard season. Like when I had cancer, it's not my fault. I didn't ask for this.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but I am of the belief that saying I'm sorry is simply to acknowledge that this isn't ideal, that we are
Yeah.
not dealing with an ideal situation. And I'm sorry it's not an ideal situation. I'm
Mm.
sorry that I'm suffering. I'm sorry I'm going through this hard season. I'm also sorry how my hard season is impacting you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm.
And that's kind of how I approach apologies and saying I'm sorry. Is it's a way to communicate, I see you, I see that this is not ideal, I see how this is impacting you, and this is not what I want. I don't want this for
Yeah.
you. And that's
Yeah.
how you can say you're sorry without feeling like, am I being dishonest? Because I'm not. It's not my fault. It's really not
Hmm.
about fault. It's
Yeah.
just about acknowledging the reality. I have a counselor, leadership mentor in my life, and he's constantly reminding me that when we're focused on blame, like who's to blame for this or who's responsible for this, that creates a
Hmm.
learning disability.
That's right. Yeah. Oh,
And he
that's
said,
good.
isn't that good? And so he's constantly reminding,
Hmm.
if you want to avoid a learning disability, then the whole blame question, who's to blame, who's at fault, needs to go
Mm.
off the table. And just
Yeah.
acknowledge the reality of it. It's nobody's fault. But boy, we're
Yeah.
in a really crappy situation here. And I want to acknowledge it and at least take a moment to empathize. I'm sure it's difficult for you too, not just me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
The other thing I would add to that, and we'll just do this briefly.
Yeah.
The truth is some friendships don't survive hard seasons.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. Yeah.
They just don't. And that's hard. And we'll feel like we failed somehow, or we'll try
Hmm.
to again slip into this kind of shame and blame thing. But some friendships, I do believe that God brings some relationships to us for a season and only a season. They're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
forever.
Hmm.
And some people, some relationships have their own wounds, right?
Yeah.
That just can't tolerate
Yeah.
this kind of complicated season. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
They're doing the best they can. You're doing the best you
That's
can.
right.
And sometimes the season or the friendship just doesn't survive the season. And that's okay. And being
Hmm.
able to let it go and appreciate it for what it was, but understand
Hmm.
that this is a different season and not carrying bitterness or all of the convoluted shame or
Hmm.
regret or blame or whatever, and just go, it happens sometimes. We both did the best we could. It just didn't serve that. Maybe years down the road we'll reconnect, but for right now, I just need to let it go and have lots of
Yeah.
grace around it.
Mm. So, so good. Wonderful.
Friends, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation with Michele. I just want to pop in super quick and remind you of two things. So first and foremost, the Courage Becomes Her podcast is brought to you by my coaching, Laurel Emery and Company. And I still do have 2 spots available for new clients in October. So maybe you are an entrepreneur or a businesswoman and have a challenge that you're working through and could use a trusted advisor to walk alongside you and to either help you with accountability or planning or visioning. I would love to partner with you and join with you. So please do reach out to me, laurel@laurelemery.com. You can email me. And I'd love for us to connect for a complimentary consultation and then talk about what it would look like to work together. Second, I'd love for you to share today's episode with a woman in your life, either a woman who has been going through a hard time and is having trouble, reciprocating in friendships and just, feeling guilty like I have been about not being able to pour into friends like in the past. Or you are one of these midlife women like Michele and I are, and you're, in that space of just wrestling with how do I make peace with things not being what I had hoped or expected or envisioned at this season. So think of that woman in your life and share today's episode with her. And let's get back to the conversation with Michele.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue and transition for us to talking about surviving midlife, because I think that feeds into, some of our expectations of midlife that, friendships, we have our expectations around friendship. So transitioning to that. So many of us get to midlife and I don't know if we can necessarily define midlife. It seems like it's broadened a little bit as we're, getting older or living longer, I guess. But that we get to this place of it's just not what we had expected or envisioned, that, we were maybe idealistic or unrealistic or optimistic. So let's start with just how do we make peace with that, with being in a place of, not having it be what we had expected or envisioned.
I'm so glad you said it that way, because, the very first book I wrote was called Undone, a story of making peace with an unexpected life.
Yeah.
And I think my cancer, I was diagnosed with cancer for the first time when I was 39 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, about 8 months after that, is when we fostered 3 more children in our family. And so it was right around my 40th birthday. So here I was hitting 40 and I'm dealing with a cancer diagnosis and foster adopting 3 more kids with a hard history. And like overnight, my life did not look at all like what I expected it to look like by now. And I'm 52 now. So it's been 12 years, 13 years since that kind of initial change. And so in some ways, those circumstances launched me into midlife kind of early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wouldn't say at 39 I was midlife, but it kind of launched me into wrestling with things that a lot of people don't wrestle with until they're in their 50s or 60s. And and I think this whole idea of how do we make peace with an unexpected life, part of that journey is simply maturity. Okay. And this is what I mean. As I watch my teenagers, and they really think, when you are 16, 17, I look at my sons who are young adults, they're in their 20s and 30s, you really think you have all the control in the world to make your life what you want it to be.
Yeah.
There's this illusion of control, right?
Yeah.
And you think that if I just make the right choices or do certain things, everything's going to go according to plan. I think as you mature and get older and older, you realize how little control you actually have. Right?
Yeah.
And so our process of making peace with a life that doesn't look quite like we thought it would, and that's what that's what a midlife crisis is all about, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really a process, a journey of grieving the fact that you don't have as much control as you think.
That's so good.
Right. So when you see men or women having a midlife crisis, they're scrambling, trying to get control. They're buying the fast car. They're, toying around with different relationships or whatever. They're trying to get some semblance of control. And that always proves to be unhelpful, because the truth is we don't have control. There's so much we don't control. And so that's why I see this journey of midlife really being about a process of maturity and recognizing, admitting that we have far less control than we think, and then relinquishing control to something else, something bigger than us. And for me, that's my faith.
So good. So it might seem repetitive, but I want to ask it anyway. When we're in that space, like there's such, at least for me, and I've seen it with clients, I know you have with your clients as well. We've read it in, books that have come out, especially by, women that are kind of in, our age range of this coming to terms with dreams that either have died or dreams that
Mm-hmm.
we know it's just not possible for them to come true anymore. So talk about maybe that specifically. And it could
Yeah.
be relational dreams, it could be career or
Professional. Yeah.
professional, it could be, dreams for your kids, any or all of those.
Yeah. It's so funny when we're 24 years old, we really think that we have so much time and that we can
Mhm.
do that thing of, we'll get to that. We'll do that thing. We can do anything. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're, like maybe 52 and you're like, yeah, I may not learn how to be a ballet dancer at this point. So, it's just
Right.
not going to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Or, I've raised my kids. There's no going back and having a baby. I mean, hopefully not. Going back and having a newborn and experiencing it all over again, like those chapters,
Yeah.
those opportunities, the door has closed or is closing. And really that how we navigate that, first of all, we got to just grieve it. I do think there's
Mm,
value in acknowledging that this is a loss, that this is
mm,
something that we regret, that we missed out on, that window has closed, and just admitting it. We talked about Brennan Manning and Henry Nouwen earlier. I can't remember which one said it. I think it was Brennan Manning who said, "Whatever is denied cannot be healed."
mm, mm.
Whatever is denied cannot be healed. In other words, if we really want to make peace with this season of our life, we just got to admit the fact that there's some disappointments. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody who achieves old age without some things not going according to plan. That's just part of the
Yeah.
human condition.
Yeah.
But if we want to be able to embrace what is, we've got to
Mm,
admit the grief over what will never be.
yeah. Yeah.
And
That
so I
is
think that's the
so,
first part. And
yeah.
then once we allow ourselves to kind of name it, own it, as far as whatever it is that is a disappointment or a grief, then we can turn the corner and say, but what is? And then we can be
Mhm.
really thankful for that, because the truth is there's a lot of things that I regret at this stage of my life, but there's a lot of things I experienced in my 52 years that the vast majority of the world has never experienced. I'm so grateful.
That's
Right?
good.
There's all
Yeah.
kinds of, I mean, the fact that you and I, Laurel, are sitting here doing this, you know how many people would love to be able to have these kind
Yeah.
of conversations and
Yeah.
don't never have that opportunity. And you and I are sitting here being able to dialogue and having this kind of interaction. What a gift that is. Right?
That's so good. I mean, that goes back to our conversation in July so much around the sense of entitlement, the sense
Mm-hmm.
of we deserve it, that we're in a culture, we're in a first world country where we just think everything is endless,
Yes.
and that
And that it's
we
owed
should
to
get it all.
us.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's so humbling, but also so grounding, I think, to just put ourselves in that posture of it's not, it's not all owed to me. I don't
It's
deserve
not.
all of
It's
it.
not.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think, and people will ask me this and this, I literally do process things like this. So this is not theoretical. It's actually it's something that I do. But, there are people who are like, how do you deal with the fact that you were diagnosed with cancer at 39 and that you live with these kind of permanent disabilities and all this kind of stuff? And I'm like, I think about the 14-year-old that has cancer and may not
Yeah.
make it to graduation, is missing their whole high school. And I'm like, I got to go through high school without any challenges like that. Or I
Mm.
think of the mom who was diagnosed with, ovarian cancer when she was 24 and never got to have more babies. Or, I
Mhm.
think of so many different things like that um just kind of gives me a more whole perspective on, yes, I've had some
Yeah.
significant losses,
Mm.
but I've also had a lot of gains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
see it
That's so beautiful.
holistically.
I really appreciate what you said, though, of just going through the process of naming those losses,
Mhm.
acknowledging them, because there is something healing and good about
100%.
being able to not just shoo them away or say, oh, those don't matter, try to deny the importance of them or anything like that. So I really appreciate that
You know,
exercise. It's a good one.
it's a two-part exercise. I'm so glad you mentioned it. The brain is wired up to sense danger, right? And so
Hmm.
the brain, we're so fearfully created. Like we really are. Our
Mm.
bodies are fantastic. It's amazing. But, our brains are wired up to keep us safe so we can
Hmm.
live, right? So we can survive. Well, what happens is when we go through some kind of grief or loss, there's these alarms going off saying this is painful, 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 painful. And if we don't acknowledge it, it's like having a smoke detector in your house going off nonstop. Can you
Yeah.
focus on anything else if your smoke detector is going
Yeah.
off?
Not at all. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so that's why this is it's not optional. It's an essential two-part exercise. You have to acknowledge the losses, the danger, the
Hmm.
grief, in order to be able to then focus on what's possible, the goodness, the gifts.
Yeah.
Both parts have to happen. Otherwise, all you have is a chirping smoke detector in the background going off, and it will not stop until you pay attention to it.
Yeah. That's good. So maybe last question. There's an easy place, I think, to move to a posture of fatalism or pessimism,
Mm-hmm.
when we get to this place in midlife. So how do we change that to a perspective of hope and being able to, embrace those good, as you
Mm-hmm.
said?
This is going to dive more into the spiritual here, but I think that's such a
Mhm.
critical part of what we're talking
Yeah,
about. It really depends on what you and I believe about eternity.
that's right.
If we really believe that this life is all there is, and we're in middle age, that means our best years are behind us. Our bodies are just falling apart. I'm now hit that middle age where I can eat about 10 calories a day and maintain my weight. That's just how it
That's
is.
right.
I'm like, oh, I had a trip. I'm done for today. It's just
Yep.
like ridiculous. We can just say, why bother? Why bother
Hmm.
trying? It's all over. We're done. For me, I have children, so I'm at the tail end of raising my children. Well, it's too late now to change anything. I mean, it's just like, it is what it is. So you can't do that unless you really view this life as just a blip on the context of
Hmm.
eternity.
Yeah.
And if we do believe that this is just a warm up to the main show, then our
Mm.
view is that we're not running. Beth Moore said it this way in a study she did years ago on First and Second Thessalonians. We're not, that time is not running out, time is running toward.
Mm. Hmm. Mm.
So we have this focus that time is running out because we think
Yeah.
this life is all there is. But if the main event is coming, then time is running toward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't need to
Mm.
grip the past. We actually lean toward the future.
Yeah.
And that changes everything.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That reminds me of another coach in the executive coaching space, Jerry Baker, and I know he didn't coin this phrase, but I've heard it from him the most often of the best is yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
And we often think that that's, here in the world, the best is yet to come,
And
but
it's
really it's
not.
that eternal focus. Yeah.
My
Oh, so
husband, when
good.
I was going through cancer and was so afraid that I would die young and all of that, and
Mm.
I still have no guarantees, but my husband looked at me and told me, because I was so consumed by fear, right?
Hmm.
Because I was like, well, what if I don't live long enough to see my children grow up? Or what if I was so scared of losing my life, right?
Yeah.
Losing my life.
Yeah.
And he looked
Mm.
at me one day and said, Michelle, if you really believe what you say you believe, it's only going to get better for you from here,
Hmm.
regardless
Mm.
of whether or not cancer comes back.
Mm. So good.
Yeah. And that's really what you're talking about. The best is yet to come.
Yeah.
But it's all about, do we believe that this is all there is? Or do we really believe that when Jesus says, I'm going and preparing a place for you, that he was telling the truth?
Yeah. So, so, so good. I love it. Okay, our final closing question is who or what is inspiring courage in you at this point in time? This week, back to school
This
week.
week. Well, I will say what's inspiring courage in me right now is, and he would probably hate it that I'm saying this, so hopefully he won't listen to this podcast, but it's my husband. He's in a season right now where he's learning. He's 57 years old. It so fits this conversation about midlife. And he's doing different things in his life right now that he's never done before, because he's taking a posture of wanting to grow and to learn. And that is inspiring courage in me, seeing him lean into the season and not kind of say, well, I'm at the tail end of life, but instead say, I want to learn something new. And so he has all these different things he's doing right now. He's getting his pilot's license. He's doing all these different things because he wants to take the posture of a learner. And that is inspiring courage in me.
Yeah, so good. So good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today and inspiring courage in us. Appreciate it so much.
Laurel. So good to be with you.
Okay, I love that Michele pointed us to a big component, if not the main component, of our midlife awakenings, our midlife experiences, our midlife crises having to do with the illusion of control. That is something I'm going to be thinking about for quite some time and have been thinking about it, because I think if you listen to episode 49 back on August 15th with Sharon Hottie Miller, we at the very tail end talked about her newest book, The Cost of Control. And in that book, she very much dives into just overall the idea that has come up, especially because of the pandemic, of us feeling like we are in control when, really we're not, and just being in that place of figuring out how do we relinquish control. So I love that Michele brought that back to us in this topic of midlife. So definitely a good nugget for all of us to just be pondering over and thinking about. So I'm thrilled for you to join us as we launch into this new series about surviving midlife. We're going to cover a ton of topics, everything from hormones and menopause and premenopause in our bodies to our relationships and our just overall different facets of health, whether that's relational health or, like I said, physical health as well. And a ton of other ones aside from that. So really looking forward to having you join us as we enter into that conversation and that series. And I know that it will just resonate with so many of us, as, really kind of the experts really say midlife nowadays can be from basically like 35 to 65. So there's a lot of us that are really in that space. So I'm really grateful to have you join us, and make sure you check out the show notes for links to Michele's books, as well as to previous conversations, the July conversation of Michele and I, as well as ways to connect with Michele. She would welcome that so much, whether it's her website, her Instagram, Facebook, etc. So thanks so much, and we'll be back next week to talk more about midlife. What an honor to help you to cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in your life and work. Thank you so much for inviting me to journey with you. I look forward to being back with you next week, where we'll hear another story from a woman whom I love and am inspired by and look forward to learning from.